Do you really believe it's hard work that makes someone rich? If that were true, why does the bricklayer who wakes up before dawn still end the month broke? Why does the nurse who spends entire nights caring for others barely manage to pay her bills? Why does the driver who works twice the average hours live with an empty tank and a weary spirit? I believed that for a long time. I thought effort was everything, until I realized that effort, without awareness, is just a survival cycle. And it was one single practice, simple, almost ridiculous at first glance, that completely transformed who I was and where I was headed. This practice didn't require luck, a degree, or connections. It only demanded a new point of vibration. Because believe me, everything vibrates. Your body, your emotions, your thoughts, money itself. And what truly changes your reality isn't what you do, but the frequency with which you are aligned. I remember exactly what it was like to look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back. A tired man, trapped in debt, with a salary that barely covered the essentials. I worked for the Toronto Fire Department, and even though I was helping to save lives, I couldn't save my own financial situation. Every month it was the same cycle: get paid, settle what I could, push the rest forward, and pretend everything was fine. Deep down, I felt a constant weight, that suffocating feeling that life was passing me by and I had no control over it whatsoever. It was as if the world was made for others to prosper, and I was born merely to survive. One day, a man named Raymond Douglas Stanford appeared in my life. He handed me a book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and simply told me, read it carefully. What's inside could change everything. I didn't believe him. I thought the only thing that could change my life was earning more, working harder, finding a better job. But still, I took the book home. I'd read one page and think, this is impossible. It makes no sense. And yet, something inside me couldn't stop. Because deep down I felt there was something inherently wrong with believing that a man's destiny was to live in debt and exhaustion. Those words began to infiltrate my mind like tiny sparks of hope. Hill stated that everything begins in the mind. That thought is the seed of all wealth. At first I laughed, but then I started observing my life from a different angle. I realized that every decision I made stemmed from a thought, and that the quality of my thoughts was reflected in my results. And that's when it all started to make sense. I worked hard, but I thought poor. I saw myself as someone who struggled, and the universe simply gave me more reasons to keep struggling. Perhaps you felt that too, that sensation of running in circles, working harder, striving more, but always ending up back at the same point, as if there were an invisible force pulling you back, no matter how hard you tried to advance. I felt that too, until I realized the problem was never the work itself, but the energy I invested in it. I vibrated scarcity. I spoke of lack, thought of lack, lived in lack. And the universe, like a perfect mirror, could only return the reflection of what I emitted. It was at that moment that I understood what Raymond meant. Results never lie, Bob. They are merely the mirror of your vibration. And that hurt, because I understood that I myself had created that reality. I myself had tuned my life to the wrong frequency. It wasn't bad luck, it wasn't destiny, it wasn't others. It was me. And the hardest thing to admit is that for years I had become my own obstacle. But something within me shifted when I accepted that truth. I decided for the first time that I would stop looking outwards for blame and start looking inwards for answers. I realized that if everything was energy, then I could learn to direct mine. And if my mind was a frequency transmitter, I could choose what to send out. It was a silent awakening, almost invisible. But from that moment on, my life was never the same. I started asking myself, what if everything I'd attracted so far was merely a reflection of what I believed was possible for me? And what if by changing that belief, I could change everything? I didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time I had asked the right question. And it was that question that opened the doors to a new path. The path where I realized that wealth, success, and freedom don't begin in your pocket, but within the mind of one who decides they are already worthy of receiving them. I vibrated at the frequency of scarcity, and I didn't even realize it. My thoughts were like an old radio, always tuned to the same station: lack. lack of time, lack of money, lack of luck. I'd wake up already worried about what I didn't have and fall asleep imagining everything that could go wrong. It was an invisible yet powerful cycle. The energy I emanated attracted more of the same circumstances, more problems, more bills, more worries. I didn't understand it at the time, but life was simply reflecting what I projected onto it. I was trapped in the vibration of need, and the obedient universe returned exactly what I transmitted. The cruelest part was that I believed I was doing everything right. I worked hard, sacrificed weekends, wore myself out physically, but nothing changed. And that's where the frustration grew. I'd see less driven people achieving what I only dreamed of, and I'd ask myself, why is it so hard for me? The answer later would reveal itself as simple and unsettling because I vibrated difficulty. I fed it with my thoughts, my words, and my emotions. Think for a moment. How many times have you told yourself, this is impossible, I'll never succeed, I can't live like this? Each one of those phrases is a seed of scarcity sown in the soil of the mind. And what happens when you plant seeds of lack? Trees of fear, doubt, and limitation grow. I had cultivated an entire garden of negative thoughts, and yet I expected to harvest prosperity. It was like watering thorns and expecting flowers. Over time, I realized that my mind functioned like a magnet. Everything I focused on, consciously or unconsciously, was what I attracted. And that realization was tough because it meant admitting that I was the creator of my own reality. But it was also liberating, because if I had the power to create scarcity, then I also had the power to create abundance. I started paying attention to my daily thoughts. I discovered that most of them weren't new. They were automatic repetitions from the past. Fear of failure, guilt for not having done enough, insecurity about the future. The human mind tends to repeat what is familiar, even if it keeps us trapped in pain. And the most curious thing is that the vibration of scarcity disguises itself as prudence. You think you're being realistic, when in reality, you're just perpetuating fear. How many people today live this way, worried about what might be lacking instead of focusing on what they can create? The fear of losing money is so strong that it paralyzes any movement towards wealth. Most people work not to achieve something, but to avoid failure. And living to avoid loss is the opposite of living to expand. I discovered that there's a profound difference between wanting and being ready to receive. Everyone wants more money, more freedom, more peace. But few feel worthy of it. And the universe doesn't deliver what you ask for with your mouth. It delivers what you vibrate with your heart. I vibrated the fear of scarcity, so everything in my life seemed to be lacking. One day, a mentor told me something I've never forgotten. Bob, energy doesn't lie. What you have today is the exact reflection of what you feel every day. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, because in that instant, I realized I was trying to change the outer world without changing my inner world. I was trying to harvest new fruits with old roots. The change began when I decided to redirect my focus. Instead of thinking about what was missing, I started thinking about what I wanted to create. At first, it felt forced. It was like rowing against a current of years of conditioning. But little by little, my energy began to shift. I felt more lightness when waking up. Ideas flowed with more clarity. And most impressively, people and opportunities began to appear unexpectedly. It wasn't coincidence, it was vibration. Life always gives you what matches your frequency. It's like a radio station. If you want to listen to classical music, there's no point in turning the dial to the news channel. And yet most people try to live in abundance while tuned into the frequency of scarcity. They want to prosper, but they speak of crisis. They want success, but they vibrate doubt. They want freedom, but they live in fear. When I understood this, I realized that the first step wasn't to earn more money. It was to stop thinking like someone who is always in debt. And perhaps this is where you are right now, trying to change your life with the same kind of thinking that created your problems. The truth is, there's no prosperity without a new mental vibration. You cannot attract abundance while your energy is busy fighting against the fear of lack. At that time, I felt as if I was trapped in a dark room, fumbling along the walls for an exit. But the exit was never outside. It was always in the switch of my mind. And when I decided to turn on that light, I realized something simple and powerful. Life doesn't respond to your effort. It responds to your frequency. And when that frequency shifts, everything around you inevitably starts to change too. One day I decided I couldn't live like that anymore. Everything I had learned about effort, merit, and hard work seemed to make no sense anymore because nothing truly changed. I was tired of repeating the same cycle and seeing the same result. It was then that I decided to do something different, something that even seemed too naive to work. I took a piece of paper, sat in silence, and wrote down a goal. Just one sentence. I'm going to earn $25,000. At that instant, it seemed as distant as a mountaintop that I didn't even know where to begin to climb. I was earning less than $4,000 a year and owed more than $6,000. I had no idea how something like that could happen, but I didn't argue with what was on the paper. I just wrote it down, and unknowingly, that simple gesture was about to change everything. Every day upon waking, I would pick up that piece of paper and read it aloud. At first, it sounded like a lie. I saw no logical reason to believe it. I felt like an imposter repeating a fantasy. But still, I continued. Because something within me said that if I wanted a new life, I needed to behave like someone who believed it was possible. The daily repetition of that phrase began to seep into my subconscious. It became a seed planted in the fertile ground of imagination. Initially, nothing seemed to change, but something inside me began to stir. I started seeing possibilities where before I only saw walls. I began to notice opportunities that had previously gone unnoticed. The vibration was changing. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. I realized that the more I read that goal, the more my body reacted as if it were true. My emotional state began to align with the mental image I repeated every day. And it was in this state of new vibration that an idea emerged. I heard about a man who made a living cleaning offices. Most people would have laughed at that, but at that moment, I was on another level of perception. I thought, I can do that too. And I told myself, but if I'm going to do it, it's going to be my way. I won't work for anyone. I'll create my own business. I grabbed a bucket, some brooms, a used floor polisher, and started. I didn't even have enough money for the equipment, so I borrowed it. The first contract was for just $15, an almost symbolic amount, but it was the beginning. Then came another contract for $65, and shortly after, I was already earning $12,000 a month. This happened in 1961. Nothing in the economy changed. No sudden luck appeared. The only thing that had changed was my thought pattern. When you change your vibration, the opportunities that have always been there finally become visible. They don't appear out of nowhere. They've always existed. What changes is that before, your mind was blocked by scarcity. You become unable to see what the universe places before you because your frequency is stuck in fear. I lived in that blindness. It was only when I changed my mindset that I realized what I called other people's luck was just the natural result of an open mindset. Every new contract I closed was living proof that my mind was reprogramming itself, and the more results I saw, the more I believed. It was an inverse cycle of the one that held me back before. Before, I waited for the result to believe. Now, I believed first, and the result came. That's when I understood the power of applied faith, the power of directed imagination. There is no limit for those who understand this. The paper where I wrote $25,000 wasn't magical, but it was symbolic. It represented my decision to see myself in a new way. Each time I read it, I was affirming to myself that abundance was possible, that I was worthy of receiving it. And gradually, this idea ceased to be a hope and became a conviction. The curious thing is that as my life transformed, the people around me remained stuck in the same place. They saw the results, but they didn't see the process. They said I had been lucky, that it was good timing, that someone helped me. But no one realized that it all began with a single choice, shifting the focus from what was lacking to what was possible. I started poor, without formal education, without experience, without contacts. But what I had was a mind willing to change, and that's worth more than any diploma, because when a mind awakens, it doesn't need permission to create. It simply creates. This small practice, Writing down a goal and reading it every day pulled me out of mediocrity and led me to freedom. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that the universe doesn't respond to logic. It responds to vibration. When you start to vibrate like someone who is already prosperous, life begins to adjust to your new frequency. You attract ideas, people, synchronicities. Not because it's magic, but because you are finally open to seeing what has always been around you. And it all started with a simple piece of paper and a decision to believe in the impossible, even when there was no visible sign that it could work. That was the seed. And a seed, when planted with faith and watered with constancy, transforms any desert into a fertile field of possibilities. Science today proves what for a long time was called mysticism. Every thought we have emits a frequency, an energetic signal that interacts with the field around us. It's pure physics. The human brain is a generator and transmitter of electromagnetic waves, and every emotion we feel, fear, joy, anger, gratitude, has a unique vibrational signature. When you constantly think about scarcity, your body reacts as if it truly is in danger, and your energetic field closes. That's why opportunities seem to disappear when you are afraid. You literally stop perceiving them, not because they don't exist, but because your mind filters everything that doesn't match the internal state you are emitting. The opposite is also true. When you start to vibrate with confidence, faith, and gratitude, your body changes. Your heartbeats align, your breathing calms, and your brain enters coherence with your heart. In this state, you become an open channel to perceive what was once invisible. And that's when the magic, or rather the science out happens. What seemed inaccessible begins to draw near. People, ideas, possibilities, everything begins to flow naturally. It is your vibration adjusting to the frequency of what you desire. The practice of the goal letter is the simplest and most powerful method I have ever known to provoke this frequency shift. At first glance, it seems like just a symbolic action, writing a wish on a piece of paper. But what it actually does is reprogram the brain through conscious repetition. Each time you read your goal, you create a new neural connection. Each reading reinforces the mental image, and the brain, unable to distinguish the real from the imagined, begins to act as if what is written already exists. This alters your perception, and your perception changes your behaviors, your feelings, and consequently, your results. Most people don't understand this process because they want to see the result before changing their thoughts. They wait for money to appear to feel prosperous, for love to arrive to feel complete, for opportunity to emerge to feel confident. But the universe works in reverse. You first become vibrationally aligned, and only then does the external world reflect that change. It's like tuning a radio. You need to be on the right frequency to pick up the station. If you want to listen to music but are tuned to static, it's not the station's fault. It's your tuning. That's what I understood when I started reading my letter every day. I wasn't just reciting words, I was training my mind to see what it had previously ignored. At first, it seemed like a mechanical ritual, but over time I realized how much this practice transformed me emotionally. I felt a new strength growing within me, a silent conviction that what I wanted was already mine, just not yet manifested. And when that feeling took hold, opportunities began to appear with a precision that seemed impossible to explain. There's a mechanism in the brain called the reticular activating system, responsible for filtering the information we receive. It selects what confirms our beliefs and ignores the rest. That's why when you decide to buy a specific car model, you start seeing it everywhere. It was always there, but your mind now recognizes it. The same happens with money, with success, with love. When you reprogram your focus, you reprogram the filter of your reality. Therefore, the goal letter isn't an amulet, it's a mental reconditioning. It breaks the autopilot of scarcity and forces your mind to align with abundance. It's a way to train your nervous system to react differently, to replace fear with positive expectation. Each time you repeat this practice, you are rewriting your internal code, replacing doubt with certainty, lack with confidence. The mistake most people make is giving up too soon. They write it once, read it for a few days, and when nothing changes, they conclude that it doesn't work. But the universe doesn't work at the pace of human impatience. It responds to constancy, not haste. Just as a seed needs time to germinate, your new vibration also needs repetition to take root. I experienced this myself. There were days when nothing seemed to happen. The debts remained, circumstances seemed the same, and the temptation to give up was enormous. But I persisted, because deep down I knew each reading was an invisible watering. And then, one day, what was inside began to reflect on the outside. I began to see new business opportunities, met people I hadn't encountered before, and most importantly, I felt different. I felt worthy. That letter serves as a daily reminder of who you are becoming. It shifts you from survival mode into creation mode. When you read it with genuine emotion, you stop being a mere spectator of your own life and start authoring it. It teaches you to think deliberately, feel intentionally, and vibrate consciously. And that's what changes everything, because the power isn't in the paper itself, but in the state of consciousness it awakens within you. That's why I always say, the question isn't whether it works. The question is whether you are willing to sustain the practice long enough for it to work. Because the universe never fails to respond, it's we who give up before the answer arrives. And when you finally grasp this, you realize there's nothing mystical about transformation, only coherence. Aligned thoughts create coherent emotions. Coherent emotions generate the right actions, and the right actions inevitably produce results. This is the foundation of all lasting change. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are, what you think, what you feel, what you believe. And your goal letter is the bridge between who you are now and who you are destined to become. When you read it with conviction, you're sending a clear message to the universe and to yourself. I choose to vibrate differently. I choose to create my reality. And that's precisely where the transformation begins. I've witnessed many people earn substantial sums of money only to lose it all in just a few years. Smart, hardworking men and women with good intentions, yet they weren't mentally prepared to sustain what they had achieved. One case I'll never forget involved a woman I met after one of my talks. She had received a settlement of $280,000. For her, it felt like winning the lottery. It was more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Initially, she felt free, powerful, as if all her problems had finally vanished. But 2 years later, she came back to me. She was in debt, sad, and completely lost. The money was gone. When I asked what happened, she replied, "I don't know, Bob. I was just living, and the money just disappeared." That experience profoundly affected me because I had seen this pattern repeat itself many times. Money changes, but the mind remains the same. And when the mind doesn't evolve along with a new level of prosperity, it does everything it can to revert to its previous state. This is what I call the financial thermostat. Everyone has an invisible limit to how much they believe they deserve. You might even earn more for a while, but unconsciously you'll adjust back to the point you consider normal. And that point is determined by your paradigm, the set of beliefs, habits, and mental patterns that control behavior without our conscious awareness. I experienced this myself. When I started making real money, I felt uncomfortable. It was a strange sensation, as if I were cheating, as if it wasn't right for me to have so much. And without realizing it, I began to sabotage everything. I spent more than I should have, made impulsive decisions, acted without purpose. It was as if a part of me was trying to revert to the old pattern, the pattern of scarcity, limitation, and lack. And it was at that moment that I realized something unsettling. The greatest enemy of success isn't failure. It's the unconscious fear of not deserving success. When that woman lost all her money, it wasn't due to carelessness or bad luck. It was because her identity was still that of someone accustomed to struggle, not abundance. And a mind that has lived in survival mode for a long time doesn't know what to do when it finds itself free. It creates problems, wastes resources, blames itself, gets lost. It's like putting someone who only knows how to ride a bicycle into a race car. They'll destroy the vehicle, not out of malice, but from a lack of preparation. Money is merely an amplification of what already exists within you. If your mind is at peace, it amplifies peace. If it's in chaos, it amplifies chaos. That's why so many people achieve something grand and then quickly collapse. They believe the problem lies in the external world, but the real adjustment that needs to happen is internal. Consider how many times you've seen someone receive a raise at work, inherit a fortune, or have a business start to flourish, only for everything to fall apart a short time later. It seems like a coincidence, but it isn't. The unconscious mind is simply trying to return to the equilibrium point it recognizes as safe. The human mind prefers the familiar, even if it's painful, over the new, even if it's better. And that's precisely what destroys the prosperity of so many people. I once lost almost everything I had. It was one of the toughest experiences of my life, but it was also the most revealing. Because there, I understood that as long as I didn't reprogram my mindset, I would remain trapped in a cycle of ups and downs, gain, lose, restart. That's when I decided to delve deeply into how the mind works. I discovered that the paradigm acts like software running in the background. You can change the scenery, but if the program remains the same, the outcome will always be identical. And this program begins early, in the formative years of life. We hear phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees." "You have to sweat for what you get." Those who have a lot end up losing it, and without realizing it, these ideas become absolute truths. We grow up believing that money is scarce, that it's dirty, that it's dangerous, and because of this, when it arrives, we feel guilty. This guilt is the poison of prosperity. It prevents the flow from continuing, and the more we try to control it, the more it slips away. The secret is to break this cycle through consciousness. Observe your own behaviors. Notice the moments when fear disguises itself as prudence and pride as humility. The woman who lost her $280,000 didn't fail because she overspent. She failed because she never truly believed she deserved to have that much. And as long as the mind doesn't accept abundance, it finds a way to destroy it. When I understood this, everything made sense. I realized that money is a mirror. It simply reflects who you are on the inside. If you see yourself as worthy, it stays. If you see yourself as small, it flees. It was this shift in perception that freed me from the constant fluctuation. When I changed my internal image, money stopped being a concern and became a tool. It began to serve a greater purpose. True prosperity isn't about how much you earn, but about who you become in the process. That's why so many people gain fortunes and still feel empty. They have the money, but they lack the consciousness. And without consciousness, money transforms into a burden. It amplifies fears, addictions, and insecurities. Conversely, when your mind is trained to think in abundance, money flows naturally. You don't chase it, you attract it. And when it arrives, you multiply it, because you're already vibrating at the right frequency. The woman who lost everything taught me one of the greatest lessons of my life. No one loses what they are prepared to sustain. And it was then that I decided I would never again let my mind dictate an invisible limit to what I could receive. Abundance isn't a matter of luck or talent, it's a matter of consciousness. And as long as your mind isn't re-educated to accept success, you will continue to repel everything you desire, even without realizing it. Money doesn't change who you are, it reveals it. And when you decide to grow internally, it simply becomes a natural consequence of who you have chosen to be. If you're hearing this now, it's because there's something within you seeking real transformation. And that's precisely why I want you to pause and pay attention. If what I've said so far has resonated with you in any way, if you feel truths echoing within you, then I want you to make a decision right at this moment. Click like and subscribe now. It's not just a symbolic gesture or simple support for this channel. It's an act of commitment to yourself. Because every time you choose to remain on this path, you are declaring to the universe that you are ready to change your frequency. This decision, seemingly small at first glance, carries immense power. It represents the moment you stop being a spectator of your own life and assume the role of conscious creator. When you click like, you are affirming, I want to keep learning, I want to break the old pattern, I choose to grow. It might seem like just a click, but it's a sign that you are willing to sustain your new energy. And that is the difference between those who change and those who merely dream of change. Think for a moment. How many times have you started something only to give up halfway through? How many times did you feel that initial motivation, only for it to slowly fade until everything returned to how it was before. This happens because the mind is a master at pulling you back to what is familiar. It prefers known pain over uncertain growth. And that's why small daily commitments are so important. They re-educate your subconscious, proving to it that this time is different, that now there is consistency, that now there is decision. I've seen many people completely transform their lives when they decided to remain steadfast, even when there was no immediate result. They continued studying, practicing, observing their thoughts, and over time, everything began to realign. Their energy shifted, and as a consequence, the world around them began to change as well. This is the power of consistency, the power of directed attention. You might think this is just a video, but the truth is, everything begins with a simple choice. It's that choice that opens the channel to the new. Each time you return here, each time you choose to listen, reflect, and apply, you're sending a clear signal to your subconscious. I want to grow. I deserve to prosper. I am ready to learn something new. And your subconscious, being obedient, begins to adjust to this new direction. This is how a new paradigm is built. One thought at a time, one consistent action at a time. It's not about making drastic changes overnight, but about sustaining small decisions until they become part of your identity. And that's exactly what this choice represents. By clicking, by continuing, by staying, you are consolidating your transformation. I remember the first time I made a commitment to myself. I was financially broken, emotionally shaken, and tired of repeating the same mistakes. But I decided that from that day on, I would do something different every day, even if it was small. And that's how everything started to change. At first it seemed insignificant, but the power was in the repetition. It's like watering a seed. You don't see growth overnight, but if you keep going, you will inevitably see the fruits. Most people give up just when the results are about to appear. They interrupt the process because they haven't yet learned to trust the invisible. But it's in the invisible that everything begins to take shape. Each time you choose to continue, even without external evidence, you are proving to the universe that your faith is greater than your doubt, and it is this faith that moves mountains. So, if you're here listening to this, don't let this energy dissipate. Seize the momentum. Click now and subscribe. Make this an anchor, a daily reminder that you are treading a new path. Let this message be your turning point, the mark of a new phase. Because the truth is that change doesn't happen suddenly. It happens when you decide not to turn back. And this is what I want from you now. Commitment. Commitment to your own growth. Commitment to your new self. Commitment to the future you are creating, even if you don't see it yet. Because when you truly commit, the entire universe reorganizes itself to support you. Everything begins to conspire in favor of those who maintain their vibration, of those who remain faithful to the decision to evolve. So, make this gesture now, not just for me, but for you. Declare silently, I choose to stay on this journey. And from this instant, feel the difference. Your energy shifts, your mind expands, the universe begins to respond. This is how transformations happen, one conscious choice at a time. How many times have you looked at your own dreams and said, it's not the right time, I don't have the money, things are harder for me. Perhaps you believe it's a lack of time, luck, or even talent. But let me tell you something nobody usually mentions. None of that is the real obstacle. What truly holds you back is your paradigm, an invisible set of beliefs, habits, and emotional patterns that govern your life like a silent program. You don't decide your paradigm. It was installed in you long before you were conscious of it. It came from the conversations you heard at home, from your parents' beliefs, from the fears of your childhood. And now, even as an adult, it dictates how much money you allow yourself to earn, how much happiness you think you deserve, and even how much love you can accept. You can read all the books in the world, attend lectures, take courses, but if your paradigm remains the same, you will inevitably return to the same point. This is why so many people live a cycle of enthusiasm and frustration. They start with energy, promise to change, and after a few months, everything goes back to the way it was. It's not because they failed, it's because the old program regained control. You think you decide consciously, but 95% of your actions are automatic, generated by your subconscious. And it is at this level that the paradigm resides. It doesn't listen to logic, it only understands repetition. I remember a time when my own paradigm mercilessly sabotaged me. I was earning more money than I had ever imagined, but within me, there was still the same fear of failure, the same feeling of unworthiness. So, unconsciously, I created situations to lose what I had achieved. It was as if something within me needed to prove that I wasn't ready for so much. And this is the harsh truth about the human mind. We feel uncomfortable with anything that goes beyond what we believe we deserve. Success for many is a territory as strange as misery. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. You get a raise, but new expenses quickly arise. You receive unexpected money, but a problem appears to take it away. You enter a healthy relationship, but without realizing it, you start creating conflicts where none existed. All of this is the paradigm at work, the old self, trying to preserve the old equilibrium, even if that equilibrium means pain. Because for the subconscious, the known is safer than the new. And until you change this code, you will continue to relive the same stories, just with different characters. So, what to do? The first step is awareness. Start observing yourself. Notice when you're repeating the same pattern, that moment when something is going well and suddenly you create an excuse to stop, or when you're about to risk something important and a voice inside you whispers, "Better not." That voice isn't your intuition. It's your conditioning trying to protect you from change. The second stage is to deliberately replace that voice. You do this through conscious repetition of new thoughts and behaviors. Your current paradigm was built by repetition. It will only be replaced in the same way. Think about how many years you've spent hearing phrases like, "Money doesn't bring happiness," "You have to suffer to deserve it," "Dreaming big is dangerous." Each time these ideas were repeated, they dug deeper roots into your subconscious. Now, imagine the power of replacing that with new beliefs, fed consistently every day. I deserve to prosper. Money is a tool for good. Success is natural for me. At first, these phrases might sound false, but over time your brain starts to accept them as reality. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. Synapses reconfigure, new connections are created, and your behavior changes. But here's the detail most people ignore. Changing a paradigm isn't a matter of willpower, it's a matter of persistence. Willpower is useful, but temporary. Persistence, when fueled by a clear mental image and emotion, penetrates deep into the subconscious and reprograms the system. Therefore, the secret isn't in fighting the old, but in building the new until the old becomes irrelevant. You don't erase an old belief, you replace it with a stronger one. I learned that fear is merely a reflection of a collapsing paradigm. It arises when your mind tries to pull you back into your comfort zone. But if you remain steadfast, if you push through that fear and proceed with action, that's where your new reality begins to be born. Because fear is the last barrier before growth. And when you overcome it, the subconscious understands. This is the new normal. From then on, what once seemed impossible becomes natural. The truth is, there's nothing wrong with you. What exists is a set of beliefs that no longer serve you. And now, it's your responsibility to replace them. We all have the capacity to change, no matter our age, past, or current condition. You are not the product of your circumstances. You are the product of your decisions. And the most important one is deciding what you want to believe about yourself. So start now. Observe your patterns, identify where you've self-sabotaged, write down the beliefs that limit you, and create new, more powerful ones. Read them every day with emotion until they become natural. With each repetition, the old paradigm weakens and the new one gains strength. And one day, without realizing it, you will look at your life and see that everything has changed, not because the world gave you something different, but because you finally stopped being a prisoner of your old self. When you understand this, fear disappears, weariness dissolves, and a new sensation takes over. That the power has always been in your hands, merely dormant under layers of inherited beliefs. And it is at that moment that you become truly free. I remember a woman who came to speak with me after a lecture. She seemed calm, but her eyes carried a weight, an emptiness I had seen in many people who achieve something and then suddenly lose everything. She told me she had received $280,000 as compensation in a lawsuit. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. She believed that finally life was balancing out, that this money would be the turning point. And for a while, that's what seemed to happen. She paid off debts, bought a new car, traveled, made donations, helped family members. But 2 years later, she was again in debt, perhaps worse than before. She didn't understand how that was possible. I understood immediately. The money had changed, but her mind hadn't. The internal pattern, the paradigm that governed her decisions, her emotions, and her relationship with abundance remained exactly the same. When money comes to a mind that isn't prepared to receive it, it finds no structure to stay. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket. No matter how much you put in, it all drains away and disappears. A mind conditioned to scarcity will always recreate scarcity, even when surrounded by opportunities. And that's not blame, it's conditioning. From an early age, most people were taught that money is dangerous, that wealth corrupts, that success is for the privileged few. And even without realizing it, these ideas become ingrained beliefs. When someone who holds these beliefs receives a large sum of money, their subconscious enters into conflict. It feels that something is wrong, that this state of abundance isn't safe. And so unconsciously, the person does everything to return to familiar territory, that of scarcity. This woman was neither irresponsible nor reckless. She had simply never learned to feel comfortable with prosperity. Her paradigm said that money is unstable, that those who have a lot eventually lose it, and that being too much is dangerous. And the subconscious always works to confirm the beliefs it holds. This is how the human mind maintains coherence, even if that coherence means misery. She began to spend uncontrollably, not out of pleasure but out of guilt. The guilt of having more than others, the guilt of standing out, the guilt of somehow seeming ungrateful for having received so much. And the result was predictable. In a short time, everything disappeared. I have seen this story repeat countless times. People winning the lottery, inheriting fortunes, achieving success, and, after a few years, returning exactly to square one. Not because they were poor administrators, but because their inner world hadn't adjusted to the new level of abundance. Money amplifies what's already within you. If fear resides within, it will amplify fear. If there's insecurity, it will amplify insecurity. But if within you there's a solid image of worthiness, purpose, and gratitude, it will amplify peace. That's why mental preparation is more important than any financial strategy. It took me time to understand this myself. When I started earning money, I found myself replicating the same pattern. I spent excessively, sought extravagant experiences, almost as if I needed to prove something to the world or get rid of it as quickly as possible. At one point, I realized I was unconsciously trying to return to the zone where I felt safe. Failure. That's when I understood that the real challenge isn't creating wealth. It's sustaining the mindset of a wealthy person. Being rich isn't about having money. It's about having a prosperous consciousness. And a prosperous consciousness is something that needs to be cultivated. It begins with the way you see yourself in relation to money. When you think of rich people, what comes to mind? Arrogance, corruption, luck? As long as you associate wealth with something negative, your subconscious will never allow it to stay with you. That's why many unconsciously sabotage their own opportunities, because the human brain seeks coherence between belief and reality. If you believe that being rich is wrong, you will find a way to distance yourself from wealth. I often say that money doesn't change people. It merely reveals who they truly are. It removes masks and amplifies identity. Therefore, before achieving great results, it's essential to forge a new self-image. The woman I spoke of could have kept that money if she had worked on her mindset, if she had learned to see herself as someone capable of managing it wisely. She didn't need a new financial advisor. She needed a new set of beliefs. And this process is profoundly emotional, because it's not just about understanding money, but about healing your relationship with it. Money isn't the villain. It's neutral, an extension of your energy, a mirror of your beliefs. If you believe money is scarce, you will feel fear every time it comes. If you believe money is a tool for expansion and contribution, you will use it to create, to grow, to serve. The energy of money responds to the dominant feeling within you, and that feeling is born from your inner vision. I remember telling her, "You didn't lose the money, you just lost alignment with the vibration of abundance." She fell silent, and her eyes filled with tears, and I saw in that instant that she understood. Money was never the problem. The problem was what she believed about herself. And when a person changes what they believe about themselves, they change what they believe about the world. If you recognize yourself in this story, understand this. No matter how much you've already lost, you can start again, and this time with a mind prepared to receive, to keep, and to multiply. Abundance isn't a destination, it's a state of consciousness. When you become someone who vibrates prosperity, the universe finds 1,000 paths to send you what is rightfully yours. It all begins when you stop thinking about how to get more money and start thinking about how to become someone capable of sustaining it. Because money comes and goes, but the consciousness that attracts it stays with you forever. There are people who climb to the top and suddenly collapse, as if the universe had decided to remove them from their place. But the universe doesn't take anything from anyone. It simply returns to each individual the exact reflection of what vibrates within. I've seen this happen more times than I can count, and one of the stories that struck me the most was that of Mike Tyson, a man who, still very young, achieved fame, power, admiration, and a fortune that exceeded $360 million. He had everything many dream of having: talent, strength, recognition, and money. But in a few years, it all disappeared. Not because he lost his ability, but because his mind remained trapped in the vibration of the past. He had learned from an early age that the world was a hostile place, that love was conditional, and that violence was the only way to earn respect. He grew up in an environment of pain, deprivation, and fear. And even when the money started coming in, that wounded boy still lived within him, screaming, distrustful of everything and everyone. Tyson didn't just lose his fortune due to extravagance, but because internally, he never saw himself as worthy of stability. His subconscious still operated from a survival paradigm. And when the mind vibrates survival, it destroys any structure that represents permanence. The money came fast, but the mindset didn't follow. And that's exactly how the universe works. It only sustains what is in harmony with your vibration. If your mind vibrates scarcity, even if you receive abundance, it will disintegrate until everything returns to your internal point of balance. It's like trying to keep a brick house on quicksand. The problem isn't the house, it's the foundation. On the other hand, there are people who faced the cruelest aspects life could offer and still blossomed from the inside out. Oprah Winfrey is an example I carry with me as living proof that the power of transformation lies in the mind, not in circumstances. She was born in a small town in Mississippi, amidst extreme poverty. She suffered abuse, rejection, humiliation, and yet she chose something few choose: not to let pain define her worth. While many identify with their wounds, she identified with potential. From an early age, she learned that the only way to escape the darkness was to expand the light within herself, and that's exactly what she did. Oprah's vibration was always one of overcoming, purpose, love, and contribution, and that's why the universe continued to expand everything she touched. She built an empire not because she sought to be a millionaire, but because she decided to serve the world from her authenticity. Abundance simply responded to the coherence of her energy. These two examples show something that many ignore. Money has no morality. It neither rewards nor punishes. It merely amplifies. It amplifies fear if fear is what vibrates. It amplifies love if love is what drives it. It amplifies emptiness if emptiness dominates. And that's why so many people lose everything. Not because they don't know how to earn it, but because they haven't learned to sustain the vibration of abundance. It's easy to desire wealth, but it takes courage to become the person who vibrates at that frequency. Because prosperity demands a new identity, and this new identity needs to be cultivated like a garden. Every day one must pull out the weeds of scarcity, those small inner voices that say, "You don't deserve it. This is too much for you. They'll take away what you've achieved." It is these beliefs, silently repeated, that sabotage the most promising results, and the only way to silence them is to replace them with a new truth. Our truth that is born from conscious observation, self-knowledge, and the constant practice of reprogramming thought. I myself have seen talented people sabotage themselves because they believed they didn't deserve success. When opportunity arrived, something within them made them retreat. Sometimes it was fear of judgment, other times guilt of leaving someone behind. But in essence, it was always the same root, the paradigm of unworthiness. And it is this paradigm that destroys entire empires and prevents millions of people from living the potential they carry, because the subconscious has an invisible limit, a line that determines how far a person allows themselves to prosper. When they reach this limit, they sabotage themselves to return to the level they consider safe. What differentiates those who remain from those who fall isn't intelligence or talent, it's the mental structure. Those who cultivate an image of abundance, who believe they deserve what they have and can grow even more, remain stable even when the world fluctuates. And this inner stability is reflected in every aspect of life, in finances, relationships, health, and peace. It's a state of deep alignment that no crisis can shake. That's why I say that true wealth begins in the invisible. It's not about how many dollars are in your bank, but the depth of awareness in your mind. When you see yourself as worthy of prosperity, money simply becomes a natural consequence of your vibration. When you perceive yourself as small, the universe diminishes your possibilities to keep you aligned with your belief. Everything you experience is a mirror of what you believe yourself to be. Tyson and Oprah represent two extremes of the same law. One demonstrated what happens when success outpaces consciousness. The other proved what's possible when consciousness grows faster than any obstacle. Neither was blessed with more luck than the other. What separates them is the level of mindset each chose to cultivate. Because in the end, what destroys or multiplies isn't money. It's the energy that sustains it. When you grasp this, everything changes. You stop chasing results and start building the vibration that attracts them. You cease seeking wealth and begin to become someone who lives in a state of abundance. And it's at this point that the universe bends to your faith and coherence. Because when your vibration and your desire become one, there's nothing that can stop you from creating what you wish. That's where true prosperity begins, not in the bank account, but in the mind that has learned to vibrate as one already worthy of receiving everything. There's something most people haven't yet understood. Your outer life is merely an exact reflection of your inner world. The money you earn, the relationships you attract, the opportunities that arise, all of it is just a visible expression of your invisible state of consciousness. If confusion, fear, and doubt exist within you, the world around you will reflect exactly that. Your reality isn't what happens to you, it's what you emanate into the world. And until you understand this truth, you'll keep trying to change the scenery without changing the main actor, yourself. It took me years to grasp that nothing changes out there until something changes in here. For a long time, I believed that changing cities, jobs, or partners was the solution. But each time I did that, I ended up in the same patterns, with results only seemingly different. It was like trying to paint a cracked mirror. I could choose new colors, but the crack kept reflecting the same me from before. The human mind is like a projector. It creates internal images and projects them onto the physical world. And what you call reality is merely the movie being displayed on the screen. Self-image is the script of that movie. It's the reference point that defines how far you allow yourself to go, how much you deem yourself worthy of receiving, what you believe you are capable of achieving. Every person carries within them a mental image of who they are. And this image functions like a thermostat for life. Even if you raise the ambient temperature, the thermostat will adjust to return to its usual level. That's why so many people improve for a while and then return to square one. They didn't change the thermostat. They didn't change the image they hold of themselves. I've seen this happen with people who gained fortunes overnight. Gamblers, artists, entrepreneurs. Some acquired several $1 million, but few managed to keep it. The reason is simple. The outer world expanded faster than their inner consciousness. The mind that was once accustomed to survival didn't know how to live in abundance. And the subconscious worked to adjust everything to restore balance, the balance of limitation. That's why most lottery winners return to square one within a few years. They didn't lose money, they merely returned to the internal pattern that felt familiar to them. This mechanism is so powerful that it operates even when you're not conscious of it. If, on some level, you believe you're not good enough, the world will prove it to you repeatedly. If you believe that success requires suffering, you'll find painful paths even to victory. The mind creates scenarios that validate its beliefs. And the good news is that when you start reprogramming these beliefs, the universe responds immediately. Small signs emerge. Different people appear. Opportunities that once went unnoticed begin to reveal themselves. Because the world isn't against you, it merely reflects what you project. I remember a period when I was earning quite well, but it seemed like it was never enough. There was always something that made me feel insufficient, as if the success I had was temporary, a coincidence about to end. Until I realized that the problem wasn't in the circumstances, but in my self-image. Deep down, I still saw myself as that aimless young person, without a degree, without purpose. That old image was my invisible limit, and as long as I didn't replace it, I would continue to sabotage myself to remain at the same emotional level as before. When I finally accepted the idea that I could become someone entirely new, things started to align in an almost magical way. But there's nothing magical about it. It's pure mental science. Quantum physics and neuroscience have already shown that your beliefs shape what you perceive. Your brain has a filter called the reticular activating system, which selects what's relevant based on your convictions. If you believe the world is hostile, your brain filters everything that confirms it. If you believe the world is full of opportunities, it will show you exactly that. What changes your life isn't what's around you. It's what your brain has been conditioned to see. Therefore, if you want a new result, don't seek a new environment. Seek a new vision of yourself. Ask yourself, who do I believe I am? What do I truly think I deserve? These questions are uncomfortable, but necessary. Because only when you identify what you truly think about yourself can you choose something different. Transformation begins the moment you decide to see yourself as worthy of everything you desire. And it's not a change that happens overnight. It's a process. You will notice resistance, doubts, relapses, but each time you reaffirm your new identity, it strengthens. Imagine for a moment that your life is a mirror. If you want to see the reflection smile, you need to smile first. It's no use asking the mirror to change. The mirror is just the consequence. What changes the reflection is the cause, and you are the cause. Everything you have now is a portrait of the image you carry within. If that image is small, your results will be small. But if you expand it, if you begin to see yourself as someone capable of creating, of prospering, of contributing, reality has no choice but to adjust. And this is what most people don't understand. The world doesn't reward you for physical effort, but for the mental energy you put into everything you do. You can work twice as hard as someone else and still earn less if deep down you believe you don't deserve more. Your vibration doesn't lie. It sets the tone for your experiences, and as long as you continue to see yourself as the same person as yesterday, tomorrow will continue to be a copy of the past. True transformation happens when you look at yourself and decide to elevate your internal standard. When you stop thinking about how to achieve more and start asking yourself, who do I need to become to live what I desire? That is the question that changes everything. Because success isn't something you achieve, it's something you embody. And when your new identity is aligned with the vision you have of yourself, the universe has no other choice but to follow suit. Ultimately, you are the creator of your own experience. You are the artist and the artwork, the painter and the canvas, and what you see before you today is merely the reflection of the last image you chose to believe in. If you don't like the picture, don't try to tear the canvas. Change the painting. Change your perspective. Change your frequency. Change the concept you have of yourself. Because when your inner vision expands, the entire world expands with you. And that's when you realize you never needed to fight to win. You just needed to remember who you truly are. So, don't keep it to yourself. Think of someone you know who needs to hear this right now, someone who might be stuck in the same patterns, believing that nothing changes. Send this video to that person, because a simple gesture can completely transform the course of a life. I sincerely thank you for staying with me this far, for allowing yourself to grow, reflect, and expand your consciousness. Continue with me on this journey, because in the next video, we'll go even deeper into this process of inner transformation. I'll be waiting for you there.